Buenos días a todas, todos, todes. Empezamos hoy la segunda jornada de nuestras jornadas Género en Asia, de Womesia. Bueno, si nos acompañasteis ayer, las jornadas fueron muy bien, muy interesantes. Hoy vamos a tener a dos ponentes que son de Corea del Sur y de Filipinas. Y también tenemos el honor de contar con Patricia Chica, que será la moderadora. Primero me gustaría presentar a Patricia Chica y, bueno, y decir que estas jornadas se van a llevar a cabo en inglés, ya que las dos ponentes no hablan español de forma fluida. Y bueno, presentar a Patricia en inglés. Patricia Chica is a postdoctoral researcher and professor in East Asian Studies at University of Malaga. In 2021, she finished her doctoral thesis, Official Development Aid of South Korea, with a focus on gender and development and system dynamics. She has been responsible for the initiative of the Equality Uni of the University of Malaga, Uma Feminista, the Korean Wave, and she's currently a member of two research projects of the Ministry of Education of Korea and an R&D of the Ministry of Science and Innovation of Spain that deals with slavery, women, and equality in South Korea. Thank you, Patricia, for joining us today. We're really happy to have you here.
Hi, hello, welcome to everyone. Y bueno, hola a todas las personas que están por aquí hoy acompañándonos. So I apologize for my English because it's not that well, but I will try to do my best. And thank you firstly for organizing Womesia, such an interesting program. Thank you to our two researchers who are with us today and all of you that are also in the debate and the question we will have today. And I think it's very important that we count with seminars or workshop like the one we have today. As I understand, all of us are very interested on studying realities or different realities that women faces all around the world, and we are highly interested in Asia, right? So having an important hub as is Womesia and these journeys, I think it's really important for us to understand, as I said, all the realities that women faces all around the world. Today we are very lucky. We have two researchers from Philippines and from South Korea, which bring us two really hot topics, and especially the one in Korea. I think Hyun Subin, she will explain us why. But today we have Raffaella Reyes Potestades with the topic of her research is exploring the role of teacher talk in the gender identity construction of Filipino children. Raffaella, a little bit of information about her. She worked as gender consultant and is graduate student of the Master of Arts in Women Development Program in the University of the Philippines, Diltam. Also, she has been working in several projects related to gender and women. So that's why it's very important to have her, that we have her today to talk about these realities in the Philippines. And also we have another young researcher, Hyun Subin. She's from South Korea and she graduated in psychology from Kookmin University. And today she will talk about anti-feminism, backlash of men in 20s in South Korea. As I said, a really hot topic as today are the presidential elections in Korea, and feminism is a very is a topic that have been very much discussed on it. So as we will do first, we have the conference of Hyun Subin, right? Emma, we will start with Subin.
Yes, yeah,
and then we will keep the question for the end of the journey, they can put it on the chat, right? Okay, so then you can write all your comments and questions in the chat, and we will get back to the questions later after we finish the with both conferences. Okay, so then I think Subin Hyun has the floor. Okay, 안녕하세요, Subin.
안녕하세요. Hello everyone. I want to correct something before I start. I have a BA in sociology, not psychology.
Sorry.
It's okay. Very, very similar. So today's topic would be anti-feminism, backlash of men in 20s in South Korea. I don't know how much the participants of this seminar know about situations in Korea, but let me briefly explain the situations here. First of all, Korea is ranked as the largest economy with GDP and a leading technology power. So economically, it's a very flourishing country, but it remains a male-dominant society with a poor record on women's rights. Since the misogynistic murder case in Gangnam Station in 2016, let me quickly show you, this was the situation. And this woman was murdered in a restroom of nearby store, which was near to Gangnam Station. This station is one of the most populous station in Seoul, which is capital of South Korea. So it was a huge surprise and a shock to the society. And the reason why this woman was killed was because of misogyny and simple hatred toward women or stereotypes toward women. So after this incident and homicide, there was a huge feminist movement in Korea, widely spread nationally and challenging the deep-rooted systematic patriarchy. The challenge has been ever since recent years, with the young women fighting to legalize abortion, which now isn't a crime anymore, and organizing widespread of Me Too movement and anti-spy cam movement, which was largely implemented on public bathroom, women's bathroom, and was sold to pornography sites. These movements led to the largest women's rights demonstration in Korean history. At their most campaigners who vowed to never marry and never have children or even have sex with men. However, the anti-feminist group rose soon after, often coming from the right wing, claiming feminist movement as the extreme and misandry. Leading mainstream conservative politicians, including 2 presidential contenders, have seized on the wider anti-feminist sentiment to pledge to abolish the gender ministry. So this is the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, which has the biggest criticism right now. And the picture right next to it is the politician who is in his early 30s, gaining a lot of supports by the men in their 20s. So the critics accuse that the department is deepening the country's social tensions, with the young men claiming equality policies fail to address issues that affect men. The repulsive antipathy toward feminism rose among men in their 20s, saying gender quotas for women given by the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family are unreasonable, and only that South Korean men must perform near 2-year compulsory military services, delaying their career starts and their educational pursuit in a highly competitive society, while women are exempt. This conflict between two genders reflected on the presidential candidate by the conservative opposition People's Power Party, which this is their party name, to establish representative of the country's young men's rights. So this politician's name is Lee Jun-seok. He took his position against gender quotas and radical feminism, insisting the country's young women no longer face discrimination in education, nor in the early career job market. Yet Korea had the highest gender wage gap, as you can see right here. Oh, right here. In the OECD country of developed countries, while women do have 2.6 times as much unpaid domestic work as men, and only 5.2% of Korean conglomerates board members are female. Speaking of which, the gender gap index and gender inequality there's like a huge difference of the two indexes, because they are they're both published in the major world organization, but they can hardly as viewed as absolute standards, because the gender equality statistics are different from countries, maybe incomplete, and the ranking can be heavily affected by how it's reflected. So in this case, the point is the huge difference in South Korea's ranking according to the UN Development Program, or UNDP, with its Gender Equality Index, GII, and by the World Economic Forum with the Global Gender Gap Index, GGI. The GII ranking announced last year showed by South Korea outperforming Asian countries, ranking 11th out of the 189 countries. However, the GGI ranked toward the bottom of the 108 out of 153 countries. The reason to do with this is there are different components of methods used by the calculated scores. And South Korea placed high on the UNDP's GII ranking because it's relatively good performance on two indicators that is reflected by absolute values: the maternity mortality ratio and the adolescent birth rate, which is very, very low in South Korea. But accepting that, the wage gap and the percentage of Korean conglomerates board members, they're very relatively low. So the gender gap index is absolutely true. Continuing, the men in their 20s had the higher or similarity level of gender equality than men in other generation, deviated from the gender role stereotypes. So the men in their 20s recognize women their age as fellow classmates or colleagues or reasonable competitors, therefore giving privilege in job market to women or reverse discrimination. However, the fairness of standard of young women in their 20s who were sensitive to the possibility of unfair damage or unfair preferential treatment due to the laws and system. In that context, feminism along with this government was recognized as power that could violate practical standards of fairness. And I want to focus how feminism is perceived from men in their 20s group, explore the mechanism of it. And interestingly, there is not only the sense of privilege that men in their 20s feel, or misinformation or twisted emotion, but there are the basis of understanding current state of feminism in Korea and society, and the mechanism of capitalism that is affecting Korean society. So I want to submit attention to attention to the employment rate and college enrollment rate. The blue is for male and the red is for female, which now you can see it is very equal. So it is very understandable why men in their 20s are perceiving women as a very reasonable competitors. So the perception of men of seeing toward women is not only because they do not receive women as inferior, but rather as an equality issue. Checking the rise of housing price in Seoul, which is very important. Seoul is highly populated city, which takes 1/5 of the population in Korea. But looking at the rise of the housing price, this is 2021 February. It's impossible to buy houses if you are in your 20s and if you're highly educated. But if you have a middle class parents who cannot air you any housing, then there is no way that you can buy your own house. This perception of being unequal or being not giving equal opportunities for men, the men in their 20s are perceiving the women as a big competitor. And because the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family are giving women quotas for the jobs, they're perceiving this inequality as not just toward women, but inequality as in general. So the ideology of men being anti-feminist, that leads to the all members of the society and narrative of collective resistance. So the narrative is that perceiving inequality toward not just the gender, but giving there being unequal opportunities. That is the mechanism of the men in their 20s phenomenon. And the reason why the rise of anti-feminism is out there, because there is a positive side, because men in their 20s are more, they perceive the gender equalism more than any other generation. So I believe the narrative of resistance of identity group presented by the identity political discourse has to be more publicized, and it has to be discussed more openly, both domestically and internationally. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Subin. I just wanted to point it that well, I think that's better for the discussion. Sorry, I forgot. So then we give the floor to the following speaker, or we have the questions now, Emma? Oh, she's here. Okay, perfect. So then I will keep my comments to Subin for later. So hello, Raffaella. Very welcome here. Now you have the floor. I presented you before, so now they know who you are and your topic. So you have the floor and you can start, and then later we will have the answer and questions. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, can you allow me to share my screen?
Sorry?
There.
Christina, can you share?
Yes, I've just allowed her, I think. Yeah. So it might work.
Okay, it's working now. Okay, I'll just proceed with my presentation. Just to clarify, I have around 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Is that correct? Okay. All right. So This is actually a paper that I did back in university that I eventually published into an article chapter. So maybe just a quick just situationer about what the Philippines is. The Philippines is actually considered as one of the most gender equal countries in Asia. And sometimes the numbers reflect that. A couple of years ago, it did. For instance, in terms of political participation, we were quite high in the number of women politicians. But if you really look at the context in the Philippines, only less than 25% of politicians or elected officials are women. And most of them are part of political dynasties or families that have ruled over provinces for the longest of time. So it's similar last names, similar people. In terms of economic situation, it's also similar to the extent of other countries that we're still experiencing the pay gap. But most importantly, care work or reproductive work is still allocated majority to women. So not only do they have to work because of their class identity, because they don't have enough cash or enough income to sustain their family if they don't work, but they also have the extra burden of having to take care of their family. Now, there are multiple layers to this. Sometimes it's just them taking care of their children, and sometimes to the extent, of course, of their husbands. But sometimes they would come into the sandwich generation, wherein they not only have to take care of their children, but they also have to take care of their parents, and sometimes they're even grandparents. So women to that extent is squished into different multiple burdens that they have to face. Now, in terms of social cultural, similar to Spain, we're majority Catholic. So there are certain stereotypes of what women should be in the country. And one example is Maria Clara stereotype, wherein you have to be modest, wherein sex is never talked about, wherein sex before marriage is unheard of and means that you'd be condemned to hell immediately. So that's just a very, very basic situation of what the Philippines look like. On the onset, we are comparatively okay because we do have tolerance of diversity when it comes to gender identity and expression, but it's not really to the extent of fighting for people's rights. Similar to Subin's presentation, people still view feminists as rabid people, as man haters, as brow burners, those kinds of things. So it's still quite stark. Now, my paper particularly focuses on the educational side of things, as my undergrad is English. So what I'm trying to look at is more of like a postmodern take of how identity, particularly the gender identity of Filipino children, are being shaped by how teachers handle classes, how teachers communicate with them, how teachers discuss gender unconsciously in their lessons, specifically in English, because that was my undergrad major. Okay, so biological essentialism, basically telling you that you are only male or female and nothing in between and nothing beyond, is found in schools, family, media, and religion. And it has boxed people into a web of masculine and feminine labels, thus stifling the ability of boys and girls to excel in various fields of study and develop their potential beyond the binary. So this is a quite common phenomenon where we have a lesser number of women in STEM and more women in the hospitality and service industry, more men in STEM and other technical industries. So lack of expression and thereof. So in the postmodern take, basically what language socialization does is that, similar to when you are a child and you are entering a community, you not only learn the different values and systems, but you learn them through language. That's why in Butler's explanation of it's a boy, it's a girl, you are then assigned so many different images, so many different associations, roles, traits that is either feminine
or masculine, and it comes with you until you die. So a classic example is, for instance, Emma and I are both named, have the letter A as the last part of our names, right? And that's commonly what we call feminine. So just because I'm Raffaella, just because I'm Emma, just because Emma's Emma, it's an endless cycle, endless role that she's going to get married, she's going to have children, she's going to take care of everyone. And we learn those things through language. We're being shaped because if we want to become experts in a community, or we want to become part of that community, we learn these kinds of things from people who we view are authorities or experts. So those are our parents, our teachers, our government officials. So one example of this is looking at it at a micro scale. Most children talk with mothers more because of women's higher interest in continuing conversations through breakdown repair. So again, it's an endless reproduction of nurturing traits, which isn't ultimately bad, but it becomes bad when you are boxed into that nurturing role alone. So it becomes an endless cycle, no? Children would continuously talk with their moms commonly because they feel like mothers listen more, because when they talk, they break down the conversations. They ask clarification questions like, yeah, what happened, right? And again, this isn't a blanket analysis. It's just a common analysis. So children mirror those different adult gender differentiated interactions. They see how mom reacts with dad, how mom reacts with aunt or grandma, and then they mirror it until eventually they adopt it as their own. So in terms of schools, we realize that schools are an institution. They are structures that allow students to construct their own knowledge with guidance from their teachers. So through classroom discussions, teachers co-build or collaborate with students to create different forms of knowledge. And eventually, when you learn a language, gender comes in so clearly. It comes in gender pronouns, it comes in adjectives, it comes in even explaining nouns. That whenever we try to explain what a mother is, it feels so natural to say, how do you describe a mother? She's kind, she's caring, she's lovable. Or how do you describe dad? He's active, he's strict, those kinds of things, right? So in the case of the Philippines, most of the country's English textbook portray and challenge stereotypical gender expressions and identity. So they assign these traits. We even have cases where we have to identify different kinds of job occupations and tell them whether or answer whether it's for men or women. So it's an endless assignment of different traits, assignment of different things that you can do in the future, different career pathways. So in terms of gendered classroom discourse, as I mentioned before, for a student to be recognized as part of that community, and in this scenario, a language community, they have to follow a veteran. And a veteran is commonly the teacher who has, as explained, authoritative knowledge. So it comes so natural to us that, for instance, when we go to school, we view the educational system and teachers as absolute authority when it comes to knowledge, because that's their job, right? They're there to teach what is right, what different forms of skills and knowledge we need to eventually enter the workforce. So we think that whatever they say, more often than not, especially for children, we're under the impression that they are always correct. And it's similar to gender. When they say something, for an example, as the tons of example I've mentioned earlier of who gets to do this type of job in the household, who has this type of roles, or in the classroom, who gets to answer these kinds of things, they assume that it is the truth because they see their teacher, who is an expert in knowledge, as saying that it is the truth. So they may tend to develop their gender identity. And again, there are different institutions. Now we have media, we have religion, we have family, but schools are educational systems of authority that they might reconstitute, challenge, or maintain a web of gendered social practices or cultural routines through classroom discourse. So that's why, for example, even if there is a student who grew up with same-sex parents, like both male, there's like a mismatch of understanding, because when they enter school, some teachers teach gender in a very binary form. So the child has a breakdown. and they would sometimes question themselves. If that's the only form of family, like a nuclear family, then where do I belong? Is it wrong? Is what the teacher is saying correct? So those type of discussions happen in classrooms where everything is formalized knowledge. So that's basically it. You get assigned in those kinds of things. So in classroom discourse, language and socialization are acknowledged to be connected, since this is where most linguistic processes of identities are formalized. So it happens in two ways when there are classroom discussions. The teacher either politically positions you according to your sex or gender identity, or they have it through gender discourses. So what are the example of political positioning? Sometimes more exploratory questions are asked from male students, and sometimes in STEM or science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, they would ask more boys compared to girls, because they assume that boys are more naturally inclined or smarter in anything related to science and mathematics. So there's that positioning. So women are subordinated in that regard, and it happens both ways. Men are also subordinated when it comes to other discussions, such as home economics or English, maybe, depends on the teacher. And then the second part is the gender discourses, wherein they tackle topics about men, women, girls, and boys. And then sometimes this gets influenced by the teacher's belief system. So for instance, whenever the idea of gender neutral, gender fair language, gender pronouns, gender neutral bathroom comes into the discussion, the ending of it would always depend upon the teacher. That's why the teacher talk has an effect on the gender identity understanding and exploration of the child. So around at the age of 5 to 8 years old, as far as I remember, it's 4 to 7 years old. It's considered as the English foundational years. And this is a period in the child's life where their social engagement are guided by social structures. Basically, this is the foundation of how they understand the world through language. So if I was, say, 2 years old, and the concept of a boy is still quite blurry to me, when it comes to the age of 3, 4, 5, and then there are so many factors, school, family, friends telling me that this is what a boy is, it's becoming clearer that a boy is sporty, is active, is loud, is playful, has short hair, wears pants, those kinds of things. So in this study, let me know if my time is up, so I can wrap things up. In this particular study that I did, I used critical discourse analysis. And then I interpreted how the discursive practice of talking about things eventually translated into social practice, or how they interacted with other people, or how they presented themselves with regards to their gender. So I won't go through the nitty-gritty details. I will give a copy of my paper if you want to read the methodology part. And I also use feminist post-structuralist discourse analysis, which again, I won't go that deep into. Before, I was really biased with quantitative and qualitative study, doing a mixed method study. So what I did was I counted the number of praises, acceptance, remediation, and criticism that the teachers give to students when it comes to gender discourses or political positioning. So praising, has an impact on students. You tell them, what is a girl? A girl is kind. Okay, very good, perfect. So perfect is imprinted in the child's mind that is correct. So that's what a girl is, because the teacher said it was correct. If it's acceptance, it's okay, that's fine. If it's remediation, they're trying to clarify. Are you saying, for instance, what do boys wear? Boys wear skirts. Are you saying that boys wear skirts? Why is that? So you see, there's an exploration of thought. And then criticism is when they get told off. That's wrong, you are incorrect, and those kinds of things. So this isn't a perfect method. I was still in the process of studying it back in uni. So I observed 3 classrooms and had about 109 Filipino primary students and interviewed 3 English teachers. And I also did a focus group discussion with children. A very interesting method if you want to try interviewing children. So, sorry, I feel like I'm rapping. Based on the collated data from the 3 primary classes, the 3 English teachers equally praise and criticize the students, but they paid more attention and remediation interactions to male students. Why is remediation such an important factor? Because in remediation, you get the chance to explore thought. And this is absolutely crucial when you're in STEM, because mathematics is abstract, it's logic. It takes time to process, especially for children who don't find it as natural when learning it. So they need those remediation interactions to further explore different thoughts and ideas. So in terms of the critical discourse analysis, as I mentioned before, the teacher has a more expert perspective or a more expert authoritative position, and they're given more power when it comes to defining who gets to be a girl, who gets to be a boy, what is a woman, what is a man. And the students find that as truth because there is power in the knowledge that is assigned to a teacher, and the knowledge that a student has is comparatively lesser, diba? Right? So the teacher's truth would always, outtip the child's truth, even if the child finds that they are not a boy and they would rather find themselves to be a girl, but the teacher doesn't agree with that because their truth is different. So those kinds of things. And in terms of feminist post-discourse analysis, the lack of remediation interactions may lead to concentrating display questions to girl and exploratory questions to boys. So girl students are not given the chance to fully explore morals of English lessons, different things that will require critical thinking. Okay, so I'll probably just give one example of the different conversations and how the narrative of gender identity was affected by language. So for instance, the idea of the beautiful, cooperative, and kind girl was quite apparent in the literature that they read, in the classroom discussion, and in the activity that they also had. It was a consistent adjective that they kept using all throughout. So for instance, in a story about a boy and a girl having a birthday party and the girl wanting more visitors, some of the students stated that she should like boys. She needs to act better. So it comes in with the ideology of a girl having to be cooperative of what the boys want or what the parents want, right? So obedient, subservient, any other traits that are commonly assigned to women. Now, this might seem like a stretch that's just one isolated situation, but it's not. As I've stated before, this came across in multiple interactions with different students, but also it appeared in their activities or essays and also in the story itself. For instance, another example is she should avoid arguments. So, the long-term effect of it is that it's getting imprinted in the girl student that no, I should never raise any arguments, even if it's against me, I should just follow. So we have a hard time confronting things, especially if we do need to confront people about certain ideas. If we do need to confront people that I'm uncomfortable, that you're in my personal boundary, we find it so difficult to do that. So there are many other things like the nurturing role, which I attributed to being kind. Cooking. This is one line that a second grader said. My mother is a housewife at home serving me and my sister to caring, loving, and teaching. So the concept of serving and those kinds of things. So there appears to be a cohesive mating of what a woman is based on what they see and from their English lessons. Female characters, girls and women, seem to be a concoction of motherhood, beauty, obedience, and infinite kindness. And there's another example of the active and assertive boys. So for instance, a lot of literature shows the boy being explained to be hardworking, to be achieving his dream, to being assertive, to doing what he wants, that he needs to work harder in order to achieve things. So there's that active agency in the boy. Okay. and so on and so forth. So the influence of the teacher's gender ideologies, what the teacher believes what gender is, mostly contingent on the gender identities present in the classroom discussion. So it's a continuous process that the teacher is pushing, that even if they are for gender equality, if they unconsciously imprint certain binary gender ideologies, and sometimes they don't mean it, it slips out because it is what's been ingrained into them, it can affect how the student eventually understands gender. Okay. So the conclusion is, when ELT educators or English language teaching educators are not fully informed of how certain perceptions can be oppressive, their own traditional gender identities become one of the dominant sources for a child's knowledge of what their sexual orientation, gender identity, and sex characteristics can be. More on Soji. And I just wanna end this. My slides are so slow. Okay. On 2 action points, if you're teaching English, if you're connected with anyone in the educational field, if the child is immersed in understanding the world through English, then their minds start to categorize and associate things according to that source. It's similar with Spanish, right? Spanish is a bit gendered, and the gender neutral terms are not commonly used yet when it comes to pronouns and different I forgot articles. So I have learned that the most important aim for educators is to allow students to express and perform their gender in whatever way they can. In extremely conservative educational context states, even the act of allowing children to sit, speak, or play in the way that they want to can be sources for them to understand and express their gender identity. Simply put, it's giving them the freedom to move, to speak the way they want to, even if it goes against the of understanding and allowing themselves to explore their sexuality and gender. So I'm gonna end things there. And if you have any questions, just let me know.
Okay, thank you very much, Raffaella. I really enjoyed your presentation. As I also work in the education field, it's a topic that I really like it. And also, as many of us are here today, I think education is key for changing gender role and reaching gender equality. And as we saw in your project, I think these kind of initiatives and researches are really promoting this. So congratulations for your research, and yeah, I really enjoyed. And I'm going to do the 2 comments and then we open the floor. And so for our presenter on South Korea, for Subin Hyun, as I researched a lot about this, I was having some thoughts that I wanted to share with you so we can discuss together, because as I understood, given the thing that there are many reasons for the rise of anti-feminism in Korea, you was making a comparison in wages and access to houses, right? Subin? Yes, right?
Mm-hmm. Could
okay.
you actually
yes.
rephrase the question?
Yeah, repeat. So you were making a relation between the rise of anti-feminism and the lack of opportunities that men has when accessing to housing, and that they might fear that women are fighting for the same and they don't have such opportunities. So, right?
So what I wanted to point out is that so the perception of inequality for men in their 20s, that was an example of like the housing rise, the rise of housing. So they perceive anyone who is a competitor of them as equally as other men, whether they're minor, women, disabled. So for them, women is just a target of blame that, you know, inequality is there.
Yeah, because I was also thinking that, as I see, like there has been a rise of feminism in Korea in the last 10 years. Of course, Korea has a lot of women fighting for the rights very long time ago, but now we are seeing a rise of feminism. So I also think this rise of feminism with women that see that the wage gap is very big in Korea, that they have labor harassment, they have less job with the same education level. So that encourages women to fight for the rights, and then men feel like a fear of losing that privilege. So men now are in a very high position in Korean society compared to women. So I was thinking also the rising of anti-feminism in Korea is comes from the rise of feminism. And also, I think politicians had a lot to make, at least in these elections, right? Because they were two candidates who openly talk about eliminating as you said, the Ministry of Gender Equality. So they both promote about this. One of the candidates even talk about like removing some of the positive policies of this ministry, and totally against of gender policies, and the other not that much, but both took feminism for the elections interest. So I was thinking that also politicians had a lot to do in Jones when it comes to positioning about or in favor or against of feminism. So that was my comment I wanted to share with you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so then I think we had some questions, but I didn't read the document, Emma. So if I can read it now and see the question from the public. One moment. So I think the first question is for Subin. And do you think that the rise of groups such as Megalia and Womat have an impact on the perception of Korean feminism?
So first of all, I want to point out the Megalia. I haven't quite catch the second group.
Megalia and Womat.
Womat. Okay. So they were the two biggest the group of feminists. They were publicized online, both online and offline. But as of now, they have disappeared. I would want to say like the websites are closed down, so it's the idea is only superficial. They're Woman and the Megalia, but because they were openly active and publicized both online and out in real world offline, they definitely had the position of representing feminism. I hope that explains your question, but as of now, they are all gone, and it's the groups are very superficial now.
Okay, so then I have another question for Raffaella. So I think we will be shifting. So Raffaella, in the latest months in Spain, there's been some campaigns supporting non-binary identities, for example, through Twitter or TikTok. there is this case in which one student was unfortunately harassed on their social media because they were wearing a skirt instead of the traditional gender binary clothes masculine, such as pants, trousers. Teachers and some other students supported them wearing a skirt to support these students. Is there this kind of social activism in the Philippines as well?
In the Philippines, it's a big issue, right? Because since most Catholic, since a majority of our schools are private Catholic schools, most students are required to wear uniforms. So it's not as flexible as you would have it if it's a state university or a state institution, because there's somewhat leeway in how you cut your hair, how you express yourself through clothes. But in private schools, it's quite difficult. It reaches to the point that if you don't follow dress codes, it can lead to suspension or expulsion. So that's why I'm saying that although we appear to be one of the most gender equal countries in Asia, it's not really there yet. It can be if you define gender for women at the very least, although it's not still there. But when you're talking about people who are gender diverse or non-binary, then we still have thousands of steps to go. So, but there are multiple organizations working on it to ensure that students can assert the right to education, because right to education oversees private institutions' ability to put dress codes. So yes, as a member of one of the organizations that also fight for those rights, I'm part of Pantay, and they help transgender students who are also experiencing those kinds of things. So yeah, it's still we're taking baby steps. We're taking one case at a time. But the movement is there, and people feel really, really strongly about it as well.
Okay, I also wanted to ask Subin again, because I think in 2018 it was created a feminism party, right? Which it doesn't have a lot of votes, but might be very important for feminism in the country. So I wanted to know just your opinion about this. The fact that a feminism party is recently created in Korea.
So there are several minor parties in Korea that supports feminism openly. I am not sure which one you're talking about. Are we talking about the feminism party itself?
It was like Women's Party, I think was the name. It was created in 2018, the one I meant. But yeah, then the question is the same. Maybe if there are more, that what is the importance of having these parties?
Well, although we don't know which party we're talking about exactly, 2018 was the year for, I believe it was the regional representative election. So there was the mayor election in Seoul, which was a big issue. And I believe there was a candidate who openly supported feminism. A lot of women in our age voted for her because she voiced out as a woman in their 20s or 30s and their needs on the society. So for me, I personally think it is important to have women's voice, a feminist women's voice in an election. So it does give a positive effect. However, they're often targeted as, like misandrist or these group of women who wants to have a lesbian society. It's too radical. Those kind of criticism always come toward them. So the positive side, feminist woman has a voice, but the negativity that he brings is that, we can always. Okay.
Yes, that one.
Right. Thank you, Barbara, for pointing that out. That they could be easily targeted. That's the negativity. They were founded in 2020. I'm not sure which one.
Maybe because sometimes I miss the dates before and after the pandemic. It might be. I know that it's quite a young party, but I didn't remember the date. Okay, so more. Yeah.
Explain.
Yes. Thank you very much. And we have more questions?
Yeah, we have another one in the chat from Laura. And for Subin, do you think mandatory military service, which is specific to men in their 20s, plays a role in their perception of gender equality? Is it seen as a disadvantage against women?
Is it a disadvantage of women? So is that question like how women perceive the mandatory military service, or how men perceive as a disadvantage?
Yeah, I think it's the response of men towards this measure, and that view against the feminist movements.
Of course, it does play a huge role of men being anti-feminist, because before this generation, men always thought, women are a group of people that we should take care of. We should always give a very kind support of. But because now this generation of young men perceive women as equally compatible as a citizen or to support themselves, men in their 20s believe that the 2 years of military service is a waste of time. And this leads to another topic, but there are a lot of looking for a word. Absurdity in military, of violence, or of that all men need to serve in the military. So they do take it as a very big disadvantage, and that because women can have the 2 years as in like a career build or a chance to build a higher education, they do perceive the military service as their disadvantage.
Thank you so much. For Raffaella, could you share some social platforms to get more information about the current issues on gender in the Philippines, which is sometimes a bit uncovered in Western media, because Western media and stuff.
Okay, platforms. Actually, the Filipino non-governmental organizations are very, very active on Facebook, and usually they update everything there. So you could access information, and this is why I trust them. I mean, like, I trust media, of course, but NGOs have the ability to report things that are not sensational, things that aren't newsworthy, in a sense that it can't be sensationalized. So I would recommend going for, I'll type it here. I also work as one of their consultants in this organization, UP Center for Women's and Gender Studies. You can find that on Facebook. We also have a website. So this is one of the centers for women that is part of the University of the Philippines, which is one of the premier universities in the Philippines. So they do a lot of studies about women, And it can range from education, sexual and reproductive health and rights, economic, so on and so forth. But it really also depends on what you're interested in. For instance, I work for Angat Bayi, as mentioned in my bio note earlier, and we study women's political participation in the Philippine scene. So we capacitate women elected officials with transformative feminist leadership values. So we undergo training of realizing what are the different values that they have. So you can also like us on Facebook. Angat Bayi. What else? There are so many platforms. But I think if you like UP Center for Women's and Gender Studies, it would lead you to a myriad of other Facebook pages and other websites that you can check out because they usually share different posts about these gender issues. Okay.
Thank you very much, Raffaella.
And can I make a question to Raffaella too? Because you said you could send us your work. I wonder if you have published it so we can read it, or we send you later our emails and you, because I really like to read.
Yeah, I published it with, I forgot, Sage. Yeah, I sent a copy to Womesia when I sent my bio note. So you can also, like, as long as it comes from me, then it's free. Like, there's no payment.
I think it could be super interesting to make a comparison, like Philippines, South Korea, and all the countries, this same kind of research, so we can see the perception of children in different countries. Okay, so I don't know if we have more questions because I cannot read here. Okay, that's it, right? Okay,
I think that's
okay.
it.
Thank you, because I was I didn't know if I couldn't see. So well, then if we don't have more questions, I think we have a lot of topics to think today. We have two very interesting presentation from Subin Hyun from South Korea and Raffaella Potestades from the Philippines, showing us how different realities we can find in places like in Asia, no? Like different countries. In Asia, we talk about models and reference and how to change it, about the important role of education, the importance of women movements also fighting for their rights. And as I said before, it's very important that we listen to other movements, other realities of women faces and all around the world, so we can also understand our own movement and our own situation. I also wanted to thank again really much all the group members of Womesia. They are really great in all that you do, and especially with this event, I think it's very important to have this kind of hub of platform where we can see each other, share our thoughts and our questions, and have a space to speak, which we cannot find it easily in social media, but not like this kind of format. And also for inviting me to be here today. I'm also a young researcher learning every day, and today I learned really much about our both presenters. So thank you, and I give you the floor, Emma.
Thank you very much for Subin and Raffaella, and we're really happy to you know, carry out this Womesia symposium or workshop in both Spanish and English. I wanted to thank you all who have participated today and also who have participated the other days. And thank you for also the members of Womesia and Patricia. Thank you for joining us. It's always great to have you engaging with all of these topics. Would you like to say something else, girls from Womesia?
Yeah, I would like to thank Raffaella and Subin because their presentations were, I don't know, amazing. I've been studying about South Korea in my degrees on East Asia studies, but I am also very invested in other Asian countries. So I consider myself very lucky to be able to hear both of you and share your views on your own societies and how you can deal with gender issues or anti-feminist movements. And I don't know, I consider very lucky to be here with all of you. And thank you very much all, of course, Patricia, Emma, Barbara, Bea also. Yeah.
Well, sorry, my voice is not much good now, but I also want to thank all of you, all the speakers and all the people who is looking us. And I just want to say that as we made these kind of things, I realize more and more how much important is listen to us in the different countries, to know each other and to know more problematics that are outside of our countries. And I think it's really important to be together and still making that kind of projects between us to support us and especially to know each other and understand each other. So thank you so much for everyone. Thank you so much also to the rest of Womesia and Patricia. And let's see if we can make this more often to continue learning every day. So thank you so much, girls, really.
Okay, so I think we're done with the symposium. Hopefully we will make another workshop or activity or event soon, or if not, the next 8th of March. So yeah, just look forward to that. And that's all for today. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was fun talking.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you, Raffaella, for coming.
Yeah, feel free to email me for any questions or any collaborations that you want to do. It's also nice meeting you, Subin. Really cool topic. Whenever I read about feminism in Korea, I feel like that's the #1 topic that I always see. So thank you so much. That was amazing.
So nice meeting you too. Actually, I did have a question for you, but then
Yeah, go ahead.
never got a chance. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
go ahead,
So
sure.
you
can
mentioned the children, they mirror themselves toward mothers. But was there a case of mothers mirroring their
Subin?
embedded misogynic image toward? Did I freeze?
Mhm.
Yeah, you're freezing. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I will phrase my question. So you have mentioned that children mirror their image toward mother, but was there a case of mother mirroring their image toward children of their embedded misogynic images of, like women should be this, or like you should marry a rich man, and those kind of misogynic images? Was there a case like that?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, children tend to mirror what their parents do. So for instance, if they find that this is something what a woman does or what a young girl does, then they tend to follow that narrative. But it's true. I think the term isn't really mirroring in the end of the mother. I think it's projecting. So they tend to project to children what is appropriate for a girl or a woman. So I guess in that sense, yes, they still do it. They are still viewed as authorities by their children, because their children finds them, trust them, provides for them. So they would trust them to say that this is the truth, that this is what's best for me. If I marry a rich man, then I'd probably be happy. I don't know. But yeah, that's correct, Subin.
I wanted to ask you, do you think there's a gender distinction or gender gap in how maybe men and women teach their students or their children? Maybe if it's, I don't know, I heard that women tend to pressure more on these gender roles, maybe because of their role as I don't know, nurturing role, but I'm not sure. I wanted to know your opinion on it.
I do think it's a gender gap. I also noted this a bit earlier, that a teacher tries to project or enforce the gender binary by either politically positioning women as lower, for instance, in STEM, or men as lower, or in whatever, right? But also in terms of the gendered discourses, the things that they talk about. So in that way, teachers has a gender gap when they're trying to teach children. But again, as I noted, sometimes it's unconscious. Of course, there are people who are conservative, who are very against anything that's gender diverse, or even the concept of binary. So they would enforce their authority that this is wrong. But then there are some teachers who mean well, but it just slips through, and that's normal. It's completely normal. But you just have to remember that you're talking to a child that is also sensitive about their own identity. So if you tend to always box them in a thing, it grows on them. It earlier. I recommend reading Melissa by Alex Gino. If you're an educator who is still iffy, or you're unsure, you find it complicated, how do you communicate, interact with trans children, or how do you ensure their safe spaces? You can use this as a primer, because it's very simple. It's a children's book. It just tells you that at the bare minimum, you just don't misgender them, you know? But yeah. But also, like, another thing, sorry, I'm very passionate about this topic, is another gender gap is that teachers tend to think that girls are more obedient when it comes to schooling. So they would focus a lot of times on girls, because they think it's easier to maintain the relationship, for them to listen to classes. So there are some countries in Asia, like in China, where the number of male students, even in the Philippines, increase in terms of dropout. So they would drop out of classes, because sometimes teachers are harsher with boys, because they think that, men don't feel anything. Men shouldn't feel anything. So they have the tendency to do that as well. So again, gender discrimination affects everyone. So again, something to note of.
This is such an interesting topic. I can see why you're passionate about it. We still have a lot to learn. Thank you. And I think we can finish it here, and we'll keep in contact for future collaborations. So thank you all again.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you
Bye,
very much.
everyone.
감사합니다.
Bye, take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.